Hello my friends, it's great to be back. I know it's been a while, and over the past couple of weeks I've had the privilege of testing out the Katwalk C2 Core. It's the latest Omnidirectional VR treadmill from Kat VR. If you're familiar with the Katwalk line, you know that you're attached at your hips, and using special shoes with sensors, you can freely turn, walk, and crouch inside VR games. For the longest time, I've been wanting to experience these kinds of treadmills, and I'm really thankful for Kat VR for giving me this opportunity. For full disclosure, in exchange for this review video, I get to keep all the hardware. That's the deal I had with them. The C2 Core is the cheapest VR treadmill they offer. It's $900, which is still a lot of money, but it is the cheapest VR treadmill that I'm aware of. So it's nice that with this technology, the prices are starting to go down. Now, let me give you the TLDR at the top. After playing with this for a couple of weeks, for me, it doesn't truly feel like walking, but it is a new kind of intense workout that I'd never had before. After 20 minutes of using this, I am exhausted and sweating, and I couldn't play for more than 20 minutes without taking breaks because this thing is an intense workout. Because you're attached at the waist, it's like you're pulling a sled. So it is an interesting new way to work out in VR, but it doesn't feel like natural walking to me. And when you first start to get in this thing, it does feel weird. Getting used to this movement takes quite a while, and after you get more and more comfortable with this movement style, one thing you can do is remove the Velcro friction pads that are at the bottom of these sensor shoes, and removing those makes it even slicker on the slick disc, which does make movement easier, but even with the easier movement, you're still tethered at the waist, and so it still feels like you're pulling a sled. On the software side of things, you can customize your experience through the Kat VR Gateway software. That needs to be running at all times in the background so that it plays with Steam VR games. But in the settings, I personally found that sliding the walking speed multiplier to max felt the best. I will say that one interesting side effect of playing this way is that games become much more challenging. I think we take for granted how quickly we can move inside games using joysticks or gamepads and just sliding, but having to actually physically turn and move and run out of the way takes a lot longer than I'm used to, and it added a much greater challenge to games. It was more difficult to dodge fire, it was difficult to get away from enemies, and I think it's actually a plus. It makes games that you thought were easy much more difficult. Now, I have to admit that a couple of times when I really hit my stride, especially moving very quickly, a couple of times my brain was almost fooled into believing I was actually using my legs to move in these games. But that was only a couple of times and only when I really hit my stride. And I think the faster you move, the more you feel that way. Trying to move slowly in these games is really, really challenging. For example, I tried to do like a relaxing walk in Skyrim, a slow, relaxing walk. And with this locomotion system, doing that slowly is really, really hard for me. Walking slowly physically on this slick disc while you're attached at the waist just physically is very, very difficult. So I think this performs best and feels the best when you are moving very quickly, but moving very slowly is just real challenging and difficult to do in this. There are some logistical issues as well using this. You are one extra foot off the ground when you're standing on the disc. And so you're gonna need a pretty tall ceiling, especially because I recommend cable management. And speaking of cable management, there is a simple cable management solution bundled with this. Their solution is to route the cable through the back on top of the main back plate and then up to the ceiling. And I tried that at first, but that didn't really work for me. Whenever I would crouch in game and then stand up again, the cable would get either loose or tangled or bundled up. So for me, it really has to be a ceiling mounted cable solution. And the one I'm using is Danglers VR. And I really need to give this product a quick shout out because this was sent to me like 3 years ago by the designer, and I never really tried it out because ceiling pulley systems don't really fit my usual playstyle. But for using a VR treadmill, this system saved the day. I especially like with Danglers VR how there's this horn design that attaches to your headset, and that ensures the cable is always above your head. So Danglers VR really saved the day for me when using the treadmill, and I'll link to their product down below as well. And like I mentioned, since you're a foot off the ground standing on the disc, to prevent you from being a foot taller in the game, you're going to want to either use OVR advanced settings to offset your floor height, or redo your Steam VR room setup with your controllers on the ground so that Steam thinks your actual floor is much higher on the disc. And speaking of the disc, I think it's also worth mentioning the shoes on the disc are pretty loud, louder than I thought. Now for me that wasn't that huge a deal, but if you live in an apartment or need to be quiet, you can really hear the shoes sliding on this disc, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Also know that this does not come pre-assembled. You need to assemble it yourself, and it's going to come in a massive, massive pallet box. And this thing is heavy. So for example, if you live in an apartment where you only have stairs or small elevators, getting this up to your place is going to be a real challenge. This is a huge, heavy box. The assembly is pretty straightforward. Cat VR provides really nice video guides and going step by step. The setup process is rather painless and easy to follow. Now let me wrap up with the biggest gotcha. Not every game works on the VR treadmill. For a game to work with this, it must have sliding, head-oriented locomotion. If it has that, you can set up the Cat VR software to calibrate with the game, and you're good to go. If it doesn't have that movement system in the game, you just can't use the treadmill in that game. For example, Walkabout Mini Golf is a game that my dad and I play together very often, and there's no way the treadmill will work in Walkabout Mini Golf. So in order to have a decent play space to play that with my dad, I have to move the treadmill from the center of the room to the side of the room so that I can use my play space again. Now, I'm really fortunate in that I have a pretty good sized playroom, but if you don't have that bigger room, then you're just kind of stuck with using the treadmill all the time, or it'll get in your way with games that don't have sliding locomotion. It's possible that's not a problem for you. Maybe you only play Pavlov, or maybe you only play Contractors or VR Chat. If you only play those, then having the treadmill dominate your total play space wouldn't be an issue. I need to move it back and forth because I try to play lots of games, review lots of games, and so I think that's the biggest gotcha. You gotta really think about how big your play space is, because this thing's really big, and if you're trying to play games that don't have sliding locomotion, you're gonna need room for those games too. All right, there you go. Those are my thoughts on the Katwalk C2 Core. It's been my privilege to try this out. I've been wanting to try a system like this for a very long time, and so thank you to Cat VR for sending it to me. And yeah, hopefully more VR content to come as we ramp back up into doing this a lot more. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye. Well, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe. See ya.